Welcome to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vaught, the host, and we want to wish you a happy Easter from all of us here at Word on Fire. Today, instead of one of our normal episodes, we're going to be sharing an Easter homily from Bishop Barron. So sit back and enjoy.
Once again, a very happy Easter to everybody. This is the day the Lord has made, isn't it? This is the central day of Christian faith. Everything in our faith revolves around Easter. If Christ has not been raised from the dead, then we should all go home. If He has been raised from the dead, then He must be the center of our lives. This is the standing or falling point of Christianity, is this great day. You know, here's my fear, everybody, that we tend to domesticate Easter. And I don't just mean with, Easter bunnies and Easter eggs and all that. I mean, seeing Easter as, a charming myth or a legend or a symbol from long ago. One more story of a dying and rising God. C.S. Lewis said, those who think we're dealing with a myth when talking about the resurrection have not read many myths. Now, what did he mean? Well, a myth, and mind you, I love the myths. I first read them, the Greek and Roman myths, when I was a kid. I love them to this day. Myths are great stories that tell general truths about ourselves, about our psychology, about nature, etc. Right? Wonderful, rich. But precisely because they're abstract, they tend to begin in this sort of way. Once upon a time. They're not concerned about history. They're telling a general story. Now, you want to bring it up to date? A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But see, Star Wars is a contemporary myth, and wonderfully told, by the way. I love Star Wars. But that's how myths begin. Listen now again to that story we just heard from the Acts of the Apostles. St. Peter is giving one of his early sermons. He said, I'm sure you've heard about the things that happened in Judea and how they started up in Galilee with the baptism that John preached. Now, you know what that's like? If I were to start a story by saying, hey, you know what happened up in Santa Maria? And then, down in Lompoc, I saw the same person, and then I finally saw him down in Oxnard. Now, would you think I was about to tell you a myth? No, you'd say he's telling me something that really happened. How grounded and specific that story is. And then, did you catch it? We hear this every year on Easter, but every year it takes my breath away. Peter blithely saying to the crowd in Jerusalem, we who ate and drank with Him after His resurrection from the dead. We who knew Him, His friends. And after He rose from the dead, we ate and drank with Him. Here's a story of shocking specificity. And by the way, the Peter who's speaking in this story, well, his body lies under St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. His successor, we could go right now to Rome to see. This is not mythic, symbolic stuff. This is a unnervingly specific and realistic story. Here's something else. How many martyrs are there to Hercules? How many people gave their lives for Zeus? You know what the answer is? 0. Do you know why? Because people aren't martyrs for abstract mythic figures. How many missionaries were there for Achilles? Well, nobody. People don't become missionaries for abstract mythic figures. But every one of these first witnesses, to His death, testified to the truth of the resurrection. In the face of torture, the face of crucifixion, face of humiliating execution, they testified with their lives to the truth of it. See, that's the ground, everybody, of our Easter faith. That's why it shook the ground. It still does. That's why it turned everything upside down. Still does. If we realize its power. Now, what's its implication for us? We'll go back now to the time of Jesus. Jews of that time were expecting a new David, a new anointed figure, the Mashiach, the Messiah. David who would gather the tribes of Israel together, he would deal with the enemies of the nation, and then he would reign as Lord of all the nations. That was the expectation. And you can hear it. Listen in the New Testament. Hear it over and over again. The new David. What does Jesus do? He gathers 12 apostles, symbolic of the 12 tribes. He then goes out, gathering in the woman at the well, the man born blind, Zacchaeus, prostitutes and tax collectors, yes, drawing in the tribes of Israel. And then at the climax of his life, look here, Jesus engages in a sort of mano a mano struggle with the enemies of Israel. We just heard the Passion narrative last Sunday and then on Good Friday. Hatred and cruelty and violence and stupidity, betrayal, denial, institutional injustice, all of it came at him. And like a great Davidic warrior, he stood his ground. Now, suppose that happened to Jesus. All the wickedness of the world came at him. He died on that cross and stayed in his grave. Who remember him today? Maybe a handful of specialist historians of the first century might have remembered, this sort of tragic, noble figure that died for his beliefs. What caused the explosion of Christianity? That he didn't stay in his grave, but rather, as Peter and the others testify, those who ate and drank with him after his resurrection from the dead, Jesus returned alive. And what did he say to those who had run from him, those who had betrayed him, those who had denied him? What did he say? After showing his wounds, he said, "Shalom, peace." What is that word now, shalom? What does that mean? That means all the wickedness of the world came at him. And he swallowed it up in the ever greater divine mercy. God's love, that's what the resurrection shows. God's love is more powerful than anything that's in the world. It's more powerful than our hatred, more powerful than our violence, more powerful than our injustice, more powerful than sin and death itself. And see, in that earthquake, everybody, in that explosion, Christianity is born. Look over the cross. You see the sign, INRI, right? That Pontius Pilate put there as a joke. Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And lest anyone miss it, Pilate put it not just in Latin, but in Greek and Hebrew as well. So that everybody could see what? He meant as a joke, but the joke was on him, because he became the first evangelist. Because what it announced to the whole world was, there's the new king. Now read St. Paul. What do you hear over and over again in Paul's letters? Jesus Kyrios. Jesus Kyrios. Jesus is the Lord. Now, we say that's nice spiritual talk. But see, in the first century, that was revolutionary talk. Because Kaiser was Kyrios in the ancient world. Caesar was the Lord. Pontius Pilate, he was Caesar's local representative who put Jesus on that cross. And when you were greeting somebody in that time, you'd say, Kaiser Kyrios. Hey, Caesar's the Lord. And then they'd say, Kaiser Kyrios, back to you. Listen to Paul. Jesus Kyrios. Caesar's not the Lord. Oh, he can run the Roman Empire. I don't mind that. But he's not the Lord. He's not the one to whom we owe our final allegiance. Jesus is in fact the King. The cross looked like the end of his whole project. But in fact, that's the King. And our lives must now be organized around him. Now, you know what we call evangelization? So we've been talking about it for the past maybe 50 years. I mean, since Vatican II. Evangelization, the new evangelization. Euangelion in Greek. It means good news, right? But you know, when they use that word, when the emperor won a battle, he would send evangelists out ahead. Good news bearers with the good news, euangelion, that Caesar's won. See, these first Christians, I love this, how edgy they were. They had no armies, they had no power, they had no worldly authority. But yet they say, we're the real evangelists. And the true euangelion is that Jesus is Lord. Do you see, by the way, why most of them ended up in jail? See, we're going to miss that, but they didn't miss it in the first century. They didn't miss that at all in the first century, what these first Christians were saying and doing. Jesus Christ is Lord. When you get home, take your New Testaments out and turn to the first line of the Gospel of Mark. So Mark is the first Gospel written, probably around the year 70 or so. Peter and Paul died in Rome around the year 64, 65 in the Nero persecution, right? Again, going to their deaths, witnessing to the resurrection. So Mark is writing right after this calamity, the Christian church under fierce persecution. Now, reread the first line. Here's what he says. The euangelion, the good news, about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Every word of that is a revolution. Euangelion. Hey, I got the good news. And he has no army, he has no worldly power, but I got the good news. It doesn't have a thing to do with Caesar. It has to do with Jesus Christos, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the new David, who fought to his death and then conquered the world in the resurrection. And then, to rub it in, he calls him in the Greek, Huios tou theou, which means Son of God. And we say, yeah, he's the Son of God. But see, in that time and place, who was the Son of God? Caesar. Remember, Julius Caesar is put to death. And then after his death, he's named divine. So his adopted son, Augustus Caesar, becomes the Huios tou theou, the Son of the God. And that becomes a Roman title. The emperor was the Son of God. Mark, in the heart of the empire that killed his friends, says, I've got the real euangelion. And I know who the true Son of God is. It's not Caesar. It's Jesus, the Davidic king. Now, everybody, that's Christianity. That's evangelization. The declaration that a new king has emerged. And our task is to join his kingdom. Not a kingdom of this world, worldly power, who cares? But no, this kingdom of love and forgiveness and compassion and nonviolence. And see, when we join that army, we are joining the power that makes the whole universe. We are joining with the Son of God. What's our job? Draw more and more people into that great army for the sake of transforming the world. You know, at a time, everybody, when lots of people are leaving the church, this should bug us deeply, especially on Easter Sunday. When we hear from people like St. Peter, whose whole life became drawing people into this great new kingdom led by this crucified and risen King. That's still our task. That's still our job. And we should never sit blandly and blithely while people leave the church. The euangelion, the good news of Jesus risen from the dead, still needs proclaiming.
We hope you enjoyed this homily from Bishop Robert Barron, and again, happy Easter. We can't wait to join you again next week for another conversation on the Word on Fire show.